Hello everyone, Storm101 here. Today we'll be checking out my spring 2022 forecast. We'll be going over some model data, some of the factors, and of course my own forecast as well, which includes precipitation, temperatures, pretty much the bold prediction. We'll also be checking out if severe weather will be active this year or not for your own area as well. Before we get started with this video, if you guys would like weather related content, you can subscribe to my channel. We do this stuff here periodically when it comes to seasonal forecasts as well throughout the year. We'll be talking about more about summer, possibly sometime in April, whenever we have time. It really depends on how the weather goes. But we'll be talking about summer and even hurricane season very soon as well. So definitely stay tuned for those updates as well. So we get started with sea surface temperature anomalies and what we got going on. There's several things going on here. One of those, we still got our negative PDO going on across parts of the Gulf of Alaska area, where you got colder than normal anomalies in parts of Gulf of Alaska and just to the southwest, pretty warm sea surface temperatures. We do have a La Nina currently ongoing, and I do expect that to continue at least through most of spring, which we'll talk a little bit more about the ENSO in a little bit. We also do have a warming Gulf of Mexico, which over the past 7 days, the Gulf of Mexico does continue to warm as well, which that could lead to some better setups for, for some severe weather as well. If the Gulf of Mexico doesn't get touched by any cold fronts or anything like that, if it could keep it that way, it can certainly stay pretty warm throughout the spring as well. So we definitely have to pay attention to the Gulf of Mexico as well throughout spring. So talking about the ENSO here, something that I found interesting is that whenever we check out the ENSO, this is subsurface temperature anomalies. So this is, if we check out this one right here, this is back in January 3rd. You do notice here you got very warm anomalies in the western part of the ENSO. In the eastern part of the ENSO, it's below normal. You notice here, not only that the below normal anomalies is getting weaker, but also the warmer anomalies as well. This is January 18th. Here's February 2nd, the 17th, and here's February 22nd as well. You do notice the trend has been that the fact that things are actually warming up in the eastern part of the ENSO, but in the western part of the ENSO, things are trending a little bit cooler as well, which could be an indication that La Nina may last a little bit longer, especially if the western part of the ENSO is cooling down. So it'll be interesting to watch see how the ENSO goes, and also it will not surprise me if La Nina will continue throughout at least most of the spring as well. It's unclear if it will really continue to May or not. As we do continue down the PowerPoint here, and the next thing here, this is the Cloud Predictors forecast here. And I think they released this back into, yes, back in early February, so it's a little bit outdated. It's almost a month outdated here. But anyway, for spring, which is right here, so MAM means March, April, and May, and they got a pretty good probability for La Nina conditions, a 70-80% chance. So from their latest forecast, they are at least expecting La Nina conditions to go through at least most of spring, but as you get deeper to the spring months, neutral phase may take over at that point as well. And here's some of the model data here. Pay attention to right here. This is then again spring. You got most of the models seem to be staying in the La Nina phase, and some of them do go a little bit neutral phase. But I think overall it's going to stay in a weak La Nina phase as well. And here's the CFSV2. And I think this is an outlier here. It's been overdone with the strength of the La Nina in the past. But you can see here, it does like to keep that La Nina to continue, even throughout the summer months as well. I'm not sure about that, but I think it at least stay in a weak La Nina phase as well. And what typically happens during a La Nina phase, if we go back up here, through the previous times when we had La Nina. So here we go, highlighting this box here. So when we had La Nina years or seasons, so you have 2011, which was a very active month, but then Then you had 2012. 2012 one of the more memorable events, which conveniently, for the time to make this video, 10 years ago today, back on March 2nd, 2012, the Ohio Valley and parts of the Appalachian Mountains did experience a major tornado outbreak. We had a couple of violent tornadoes on that day as well, and several intense ones as well. It was certainly a very nasty day. That also includes the Henryville tornado. Well, with the La Nina back at that time, it was a late La Nina. Now, a similar situation with 2011, but that was extremely active. But I don't think we're going to see 2011 territory or anything like that this spring season. I don't think we're going to get any close to that. But 2012, though, if I remember correctly, 2012, there was quite a bit of activity in the Ohio Valley, but in the parts of the plains, I don't think there was a whole lot of activity. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, for anybody out there that knows a little bit better than me with analogs. Then you go back to 2018, it was also a weak La Nina season. And I remember here in the Ohio Valley as well, it was actually pretty active here in the Ohio Valley. And I do believe out in the plains it wasn't very active at all. And then the most recent one, last year, 2021. Now, what's different about 2021 is that it wasn't very active at all for spring, except for March. But when you get into April and eventually into May, things turn quiet, especially when you get into May as well. Things were mostly quiet as well, so it generally turned out to be at least a slightly below average season, if I'm correct on it. One of those factors is that positive PDO, which when we're looking at those sea surface temperature anomalies, we have a negative PDO. That's one of the reasons why my forecast had busted last year, because I was not paying a whole lot of attention to PDO, which is also known as the Pacific Decal oscillation. And honestly, I should have paid attention more to that. And I've paid a lot more attention to it this year. And we are actually seeing a negative PDO phase, which can also be another factor to a potentially another active season for severe weather. So, really, your analogs here, I think 2012, 2018 may not be too bad analogs, as well, at least to my memory. Anyway, but regardless, now doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go exactly like these days here. Keep in mind that, but it could be a little bit similar. There could be some similarities out there, so that's something to note as well. Let's talk about some models. This is the CFS model. These models have been having trouble. Honestly, the CFS has been too warm over the last couple months, so I expect the same way here. But you kind of tell what's going on here. When we talk about teleconnections, our ridge that's going to be over Gulf of Alaska probably over the next week or two does move a little bit off to the west, which does have a pretty strong agreement here. It's very persistent here through the spring months. So you get ridging near Alaska, but it's also far west enough to lead troughing to the western U.S., which does lead to a negative PNA. And if we get this negative PNA and negative PDO combo to go on throughout the spring, be prepared for some pretty active severe weather, because all that does is leads to troughing in the western U.S. and ridging in the eastern U.S. as well. Another thing that I see here that I notice that there's a positive NAO as well, which keeps things a little bit colder up around Greenland as well. I think it's going to be stronger what this suggests here, since it does have that warm bias. And also with the AO region, it's also, I believe, in the positive side as well, some slightly warmer anomalies. And what all this leads to is that really it's pushing some of this cold air not only to right around Greenland, but it's also pushing colder air to the western U.S. as well. And with the positive NAO taking control, it's going to lead to an advantage of a ridge to build across parts of the southeast as well. Now, keep in mind that it's not going to stay as persistent like this throughout. There are certainly going to be some changes in the pattern throughout spring, but this is just the general average. Just keep in mind of that. There's already a signal in mid-March that things may turn colder and maybe a little bit snowier in parts of the central and maybe parts of the eastern U.S. in mid-March. Expect some stuff like that to occur throughout the spring, but just as a general average, you see troughing in the west, ridging in the east, generally. Here's the Kansas model, and here's one thing I do notice here. One of those things is that the ridge out here, it's slightly further east, but also the AO is a little bit different as well. It's a little bit more towards neutral, so it's able to hold some of that cold air a little bit further north as well. We still have that positive NAO in place nearby Greenland as well, so it kind of keeps some of this colder air stuck mostly up into Canada, but also the Kansas model has been a little bit too warm over the last couple months, so I do expect this to be a little bit overdone. But something I do notice here is that it shows more of a zonal pattern flow, and this does decrease severe weather probabilities. You may not see a whole lot of severe weather. Maybe the only areas that could see some severe weather would probably be areas a little bit further north, a little bit closer to some of that troughing, especially later in the time period as well. But regardless, if you do pay attention to some of these black lines for a little bit, there is a little dip in the western U.S., so there could be the possibility that we could see some troughing in the western U.S. as well. So that's something to really pay attention to as well. So averaging everything out, this is the temperature anomalies, and you can see here it's very warm. This model has always been too warm across the U.S. for really for the entire winter, except for December. It did get December correct, but for January, February, it's always been too warm, and I expect a very similar result here. But regardless, it does show a lot of warmth out there, especially across parts of the southern U.S. There is some troughing in the northwestern U.S., which does indicate for the potential for a negative P&A type of pattern as well, which does lead to an active pattern, which this is precipitation probabilities. And as you can see here, it's above normal across parts of the northwest, and it's also above normal across parts of the Ohio Valley. If this were to be if this were to be correct, some of your most active severe weather might be in the parts of the Ohio Valley, maybe in the parts in the Midwest as well. But then again, like I said before, it's been a little bit too warm, so I think in reality, it might be a tad bit further south here. Maybe just a little bit. If we do go back a little bit, check out some of these other models. Here's precipitation anomalies from the CFS, and you can see it's a little bit further south, which honestly I think this is a more accurate outlook as well. But I do notice, look at the southern plains. Things are looking to be drier, so for any storm chasers out there, this is not looking very good. Uh, we got models that do indicate below normal anomalies, which honestly I do agree with that, and I'll talk about the reasoning for that in just a moment. But generally, it's got a lot of dry air going on, well, drier than normal conditions across the four quarter states, parts of California and Nevada, the southern plains, even for parts of the Gulf Coast, as well looking to be a little bit drier. And then as you look into the Kansas model, and you can see here from the Kansas model, shows pretty much Jerry a little bit wetter for the northeast, but then again, I think that's too far to the northeast for my taste. However, with all that drier than normal conditions across the plains, similar to what the CFS model has, but a little bit further north. It's also a little bit dry across parts of California and Nevada, and also parts of the southeast as well. And here's temperature anomalies, and it's actually showing a much colder pattern, but with a more zonal flow pattern. Yeah, some of that above normal precipitation would be further north. It kind of makes a little bit more sense. But honestly, I still would believe that some of those above normal anomalies may be a little bit farther to the south. So with the Kansas model, it's been okay over the last couple months, to say here at the least. But you can generally see here with a zonal flow pattern, it's warm across the south, colder across the north. With the CFS model being a little bit different, of a more amplified type of pattern, most of that cold air stays in the further parts of the northwest, which honestly, in my opinion, I think it's a little bit too warm. I think it'll be a little bit colder in the parts of the Midwest as well. But you know what? This is not too bad of a forecast coming out of the CFS model. Okay, so one of the biggest factors when it comes to severe weather is drought conditions. And you can see here, there's a lot of drought going on out there, and this can affect severe weather setups. Some of you guys may not know that with drought conditions, And there's something that's called an elevated mix layer. And what that is of dry air in the upper levels of the atmosphere. And what that does, it helps with stronger updrafts. And your main source is in the parts of the desert southwest, especially right around the New Mexico. However, it can also bring the threat for caps as well. What a cap is a thin layer of warm air in the mid levels. Showers and thunderstorms cannot form through that. Well, for what we've been seeing over the last couple severe weather events in these several plains, they do erode overnight, but keep in mind, we're in a cooler part of spring here. We're in March. And those severe weather events happened back in February. You had a pretty good cap throughout the day. So imagine with warmer temperatures getting into April and May, that cap is only going to get stronger. So unfortunately for storm chasers and even for areas too that need some rain, honestly I would believe these drought conditions could get worse throughout spring. Now I think early on where we do have those cooler temperatures, the cap won't be as strong, but as you get into April and May, with some of those warmer temperatures kind of moving in here, things are going to be generally um, pretty dry. And it's also further east as well. It does consume parts of, or includes parts of Texas and Oklahoma. So it kind of pushes that favorable elevated mix layer, some of those cap potential, a little bit further east as well. Now, for parts of the Ohio Valley, we're kind of far out east enough where the caps may not be as effective. However, you can still, however, for the elevated mix layer, it can still go into these areas as well. So that could lead to more favorable severe weather setups across parts of the Ohio Valley and even for parts of the Midwest as well. Things are not as bad with the drought up in the parts of the Midwest as well. So some of those areas may have better severe weather potential up there compared to the several plains as well. But I think the area we really need to pay attention to will probably be parts of the Tennessee Valley, the Ohio Valley, as well. So here's the climate prediction outlook here. This is for temperatures. You can see here, honestly, I think they're a little bit warm here, but you kind of get the general idea. Things are likely to stay on the warmer side across the south. Not sure how I feel about parts of the east, though. I think it'd be maybe slightly cooler in the northeast as well. But overall, I kind of do agree with his forecast here. Honestly, I think I'll make things a little bit colder across the northern plains, especially how March is looking like. We can see well below average temperatures, and that could certainly influence those averages throughout the 3 months as well. And here's precipitation, which I actually do agree with the precipitation um, as well. Some of the best opportunity will probably be across parts of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and Kentucky with the highest probabilities. Very dry across the four quarter states. And honestly, I think this will be a little bit further east with those drought conditions. You get that really good elevated mix layer and also that cap as well. So honestly, we're going to see a lot of capping events for the central and southern plains. Things also may be looking a little bit wetter across the northwest as well. All right, so taking all those factors into a forecast here, this is my personal thoughts. So this is for temperatures. I think things are going to be slightly below average across the northwest into parts of the upper Midwest. I think things are going to be slightly above average across the four corner states. That does dip into the parts of the Arlington region, the Tennessee Valley, and eventually into parts of the Mid-Atlantic. Above normal temperatures seems a pretty good bet across parts of the southeast and even for parts of the several plains as well. And kind of between here, which includes the northeast, I think we're going to be closer to average for temperatures as well. So here's precipitation, and you can see here for parts of the far northwest, I think things could be slightly above average, especially if that negative PNA and that negative PDO really begins to take shape. I think we can see some slightly above average precipitation. Really, for the rest of the northwest, I think it's going to be closer to average. Things are looking to be below average for parts of the four quarter states, even the parts of the several plains as well. Unfortunately, I think the drought is going to get worse in those areas, unfortunately. But I think some of those areas can still experience some rain, but compared to average, it will likely be below average. That's something to note here. I should have noted this earlier in the video, but if you're like in a below average area when it comes to precipitation, it doesn't necessarily mean you won't see any rain. Keep in mind that. You can still experience some rain, but compare your average, it's going to be below average. So just keep in mind of that as well. And then areas in the light brown, it's going to be slightly below average. We do have an area of above average precipitation. That includes parts of Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio, with a slightly above average region surrounding those areas, which includes parts of the Midwest, the Northeast, and the Tennessee Valley as well. Meanwhile, for most of the Northeast, the Midwest, looking to be closer to average, and also includes the Northern Plains as well. I think your general storm track here, with that very strong elevated mixed layer and all that dry air going on, we're not going to see a whole lot of precipitation here, even though we may see a system or two, which will try to bring in moisture from the eastern Pacific here. I still believe a lot of this warm air is going to win, or this dry air is going to win as well. And I think your active storm track could look something like this as well, and you could see some severe weather in these areas in here in the warm sector as well. And again, that's an average storm track. Not every single low is going to take that same track. You may have some throughout the spring, and some of them may go further south, some of them may go in the summer track, some of them may go way north. Just depends on how everything else goes as well. Then again, you're talking about a 3-month average here. Keep in mind that. Okay, severe weather. So for areas of the parts of the Ohio Valley down to parts of the Tennessee Valley, things are looking to be slightly above average when it comes to severe weather. Things are looking to be below average across parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. Doesn't necessarily mean you won't see any severe weather. You guys may still experience a little bit of severe weather, but compared to average, I think it's generally going to be below average. Then slightly below average goes as far north as the Nebraska-South Dakota state line. It also includes parts of the southeast as well. Everywhere else, I think it's going to be closer to average. And then finally, here's the overall forecast. I am running out of time, so I got to get this done really quickly here. So for the Northwest, I think it's generally going to be cool and stormy. For parts of the Northwest, that goes as far south as parts of Nevada, California, as far east as parts of Wyoming. I think there's going to be ups and downs. There will be some warm-ups. There will be some cool downs. That's basically what that means. For the desert southwest of parts of the Four Corner states, I think it's generally going to be warm and dry. Across the northern plains, upper Midwest, there's going to be there's going to be quite a bit of Arctic cold very early on. It's also going to be snowy as well, but I think things will turn milder as normally. I think things will turn slightly milder as we go throughout the spring. Across the central southern plains, not much severe weather activity. I think you guys can still see some severe weather activity, but not as much compared to average. That's partially due to that drought conditions that could lead to a lot of capping events. Areas of dark green across parts of the Midwest to parts of Great Lakes. An active storm track, you'll see quite a few lows track over some of those areas as well. Areas in the red, that's where we're paying attention for the potential for above normal severe weather. And also flooding may be a possibility as well. It could be certainly be a very wet season for those areas in the parts of the Ohio Valley and the Tennessee Valley, even the parts of the Midwest as well. The Southeast, I think, is generally going to be on the warm side. Can definitely see some really nice temperatures out there. And then finally, for the Northeast, cold, some snow early on, but I think things will turn milder later as well, especially when we get into April and May. I think things will turn milder as well. Winter's not over yet for the Northeast as well. But anyways, guys, that's all for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Guys, like this video, hit that like button if you do like my channel. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you never miss an upload. If you've got some questions about this, put the comment section down below. Or if you guys questions, I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye and have a good day.